This will be a short video tutorial based on week 4.3.maxpat, which you can download and follow along with. And this tutorial will focus on the line object. And the line object is used in Max MSP for creating ramps to particular values. So continuous series of values starting at one point and arriving at another point. Like objects such as the math objects in Max MSP, there are two forms of line, one which deals with integers and one that deals with flow nums or floating point numbers. And you can see the two instances are here. This one, the argument line 0 without a decimal point, is an integer version of line with a second argument 30, and this line 0 dot point second argument 30 is the floating point version of the line. And that's all you have to do to specify that one is a integer line and the other is a floating point line. The way line works, and I should mention, the second argument is the granulation, or the time interval between outputs in the line in milliseconds. So if I have a line 0, default argument 30, granulation, that simply means that my line is initially set to be 0, and when I trigger it so that it creates continuously changing values, those will be output every 30 milliseconds. That's actually quite fast, but if you need a faster line with more outputs, then you can decrease this. If you make it 10, it'll be outputting values every 10 milliseconds, which would be 100 times a second. So a lot of values. All right, so the way line works is that you either just give it a single integer as an input, in which case it jumps immediately to that value, or you give it a list of two values, in the case of this line, an integer and a duration. In the case of this line, a floating point number and a duration in milliseconds. So for example, if I click on 100 and put it into the line, first inlet of the line, it immediately jumps to 100. If I pass it a list, which is 50,000, line interprets that as, go, your destination is 50, and the time we're going to take to get there, wherever we happen to be in our line at the moment, we're going to take 1 second or 1,000 milliseconds to get there. So I'll click on this, and you'll see the values going down. Now we can combine messages in lists with commas. So if I click on this one, which is 20, comma, 125,000, basically we're saying go immediately to 20, that's the first thing, and then go up to 120 in 5,000 milliseconds. So it'll look like this, 20 and then slowly rising up. Now because of the granularity of the line, we will in fact get repeated integers. So it won't simply go 20, 21, 22, 23. Depending on how slowly we're going, we might get 20, 20, 20, 21, 21, 21, 22, 22, 22, and so on. Right? So just be aware of that. The floating point version of line works basically the same way, except that it takes floating point numbers in as the first argument and an integer duration in milliseconds as the second argument. We go immediately to 10.5, and then we go to 16.34 in 4,000 milliseconds. And here you can see all the decimal places flying by as we move there. And here you will notice the difference if I change my granularity. Let's say I change this to 100. That means we're only updating the line once every, or 10 times a second, once every 100 milliseconds. And you'll notice this is incrementing more slowly than it does if we create a granularity of 10. And watch how often it updates here. Go to 10. Okay, so you can see that it actually does make a difference depending on what you're using the line for, what that second value is. Okay, so that's line. You know, it's possible to create a whole series of line values by triggering one, and then when that line segment is finished, triggering another, and so on. And so that's kind of what I done here. Notice this bang bang object. This is really equivalent to a trigger with 2 bangs. But bang bang doesn't let you do things like, say, bang bang 5, and it will give you 5 outlets where you can send a whole series of bangs from right to left using right to left ordering. But what's happening here is that, well, first of all, I trigger a toggle. I turn a safety valve on. And then I bang this message which says 100, 2000 goes into a line. And that starts a line going over 2000 milliseconds. The output, the right outlet of a line sends a bang when the line is completed. And so what we do is we start a counter which goes from 1 to 2. And we simply we send a trigger where the I, the integer, goes, where does it go? It goes, controls the gate, opens, basically switches the gate between going here and going here, and then the bang bangs the gate, and it goes through this gate, which either bangs this one or this one. So we basically have a gate which says 1 or 2, and when it's 1 it goes here, and when it's 2 it goes there. So it's just a switch, really. And so what's really happening here is we're alternating between banging this object, and then when that bangs, it bangs the next object, which goes down. So it bangs this one, and then it bangs this one. So I'm just going to turn it on. You'll see it goes up and down, and then up and down, simply by alternating between these two objects. If you want to see, let me put some bang buttons in here so you can see what's happening. Banging this one, banging that one, banging this one, banging that one. And the only other thing is that once this starts, there's no way to turn it off. It'll just keep going forever unless I close the patch. So I put this safety valve in. So when it bangs here on this side, it also has to go through this other gate, which I can control. And if I want to stop it, I click on that, and my patch stops. And then I can start it again, have it run for a while, and then stop it. So, I mean, if we wanted to turn this into notes for some reason, we could. Let me just do a make note. Remembering it's the second inlet note out. And that will sound something like this. Very exciting. Obviously, we don't have to go all the way down to 0, but we could change the values that are going in here. And actually, maybe we'll do that just so you can hear that you can get you're going to get repetitions of values depending on the granularity. So if I go from 60 to 72 in 2 milliseconds, you're going to hear this. Oops. So you're hearing repetitions of those notes, depending, because the granularity of 30 is going to send out a whole series of values, of each of those values as we run through it. So that's line. It's a useful object. There are lots of times when you want to create ramps between one value and another. Later on, when we get to dealing with digital audio, things like volume controls can be automated with ramps. So there are a number of uses for generating ramps. So anytime you want to say, I want to go from this value to that value, or that value to this value, but I don't want to jump there immediately, you can use a line, set the initial value, and then trigger the line with the destination value and the duration in milliseconds that you want to get there. Okay, thank you.